grade ginger. This is some I harvested earlier. Turned some of this into some nice pickles. Hi NatureHub, Justin here, and today we're going to talk about ginger. So ginger is one of my favorite plants, and there are hundreds of species of ginger, and many of them you can eat. Some of them you can't, so make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. I've got 3 types of edible ginger here today, and we're going to talk a little bit more about them. So first I'm going to talk about a type of ginger that most people don't know is ginger. It's called turmeric. And turmeric, like the other gingers, likes tropical, subtropical areas. It's very important to plant it in shade. So many people are getting into turmeric because of its anti-inflammatory properties. But most people don't know that if you are living in a place that doesn't get a hard freeze, it's very easy to grow this stuff. Basically, you stick it in the ground, just a little piece, and a year later, you will have tons and tons of turmeric. Now, I think this plant might have been in the ground for a little longer than 1 year, and what you have is a bunch of these nice little fingery things hanging off there. And when it comes time to plant again, you use what you want. You kind of watch and see which ones are growing new buds on the counter, and put as many of those back in the ground as you want. Yeah. Actually, these taste a lot like carrots. They're not quite as spicy as a typical ginger, and they're really good to cook with. But yeah. Over here, I've got a great example of what is too much sun when you're planting ginger. So, although this area gets a lot of shade in the morning time, it's got some bananas hanging over it. This area was just no good for the turmeric. Most other ginger species wouldn't do very well over here either. In this case, this plant is getting about 60% sunlight in the day, and it was planted around the same time as the other one, and it just kind of never took off. It's just kind of struggling here. So I'm not going to plant them in this much sun in the future. They like nice, moist soil that has good drainage, and this soil kind of got a little too dry. They will stay alive in drier areas, but they just don't grow as fast. Next, we have typical culinary grade ginger. So here's a chunk that I harvested last week, and eventually it gets a nice papery skin, but when you first harvest it, it usually doesn't. It's usually nice and smooth. And when it is, it makes some nice pickles for your sushi or whatever. And the time you know is ready for harvest is when you see these flowers happening. You don't always see the flowers, but usually when you see flowers on the ginger plant, you know it's ready. And with this over here, you can see it grows into these nice little nodes. You can break each of these pieces off and either grow new ginger plants or eat them. And actually, the leaves and the flowers are also edible on this. They're not quite as strong of a flavor, but they're definitely edible. And I've seen some interesting Asian dishes that do include the full greenery of the ginger plant. And usually, you know it's about ready to harvest whenever you see these nice big flowers happen. You don't always have the flowers, but usually by the time those happen, you know it's time. So this is going to be probably enough for me to use. I'm just going to break off a few of these smaller pieces and stick them back in the ground for next year. They really like this well-drained soil. If an area stays too moist for too long, it will cause them to rot a bit. Over here, I've planted some new ginger plants from some of those pieces that I harvested last week. And this is about the right spacing for them. And the time to harvest these is typically in the fall. So over here, I've got about 6 to 8 inches separating each piece. Hey guys, I've got some turmeric growing over here also. And side by side, I've got growing this other stuff called Awapuhi. And this Awapuhi you typically don't eat, but it makes a wonderful skin and hair product. It smells kind of nice and rosy and fragrant. And you can kind of just harvest the liquid, use it in your hair. It's kind of like a bit of an aloe type of a consistency, and the more you kind of harvest the liquid from that, the more viscous it gets. You want to wait until they turn red usually, although you can still harvest them when they're still white like this. Before I get on to the harvesting of the turmeric over here, which I'm going to do for you and show you how to clean it off and prepare it, I want to mention that ginger has recently been found to have a lot of anti-cancer properties, and especially when mixed with spicy peppers. So I just harvested some spicy peppers, and I'm actually going to make a ginger pickle that's kind of spicy with this to amplify those anti-cancer effects. So the way you harvest these turmerics, just kind of break them off. This is a little bit different than the gingers. All the harvesting of these different types is going to be a little different because of the structures. These will kind of just break off, and I'm putting them in this giant colander so I can kind of rinse them all off. And I might just stick this one back in the ground, kind of chop a few of these leaves down and stick them back in. Or I might just kind of wait for some buds to pop back up after I have these sitting on the counter, and they'll kind of tell you the ones that want to go back in based on how fast they put out those shoots. I've got a bunch of plants that I could either separate, chop down a bit to kind of reduce the amount of liquids they're going to be releasing, and then I could just stick this right back in the ground, like I said, like that, or I could put these in the ground. It doesn't really matter. You want to bury them about an inch in the soil. Actually, you want to be able to see a little bit of the top. You don't need to bury them completely. So I'm just going to kind of set these aside. We'll just continue going through here. Got a huge harvest this year. Now again, if you live in a place where there's a hard freeze, where it gets below 20, it's really not worth planting these. Unless you have them somewhere where you can keep them in a pot over the winter. Now we're going to harvest the rest of these guys. I've got all my turmeric washed out, and I'm just curious how much of this I ended up growing in a little 9 square foot garden plot. So let's load this scale up and see how much we were able to get. So it looks like we got a little over 6 pounds of turmeric, and the last time I was at the grocery store, organic turmeric was selling for $7.99 a pound, so that ain't bad. Basically $50 worth of turmeric in a little 9 square foot bed. Now it's important to notice that this will actually dye your hands temporarily, and it will permanently dye clothing. So if you're attached to the clothing that you're wearing, you might want to wear something that you don't mind getting a little bit yellow permanently. So aside from making nice salad greens, these leaves also make some good compost. We've got a whole cart full of it over there. And before we finish up today, I'm just going to replace the turmeric we harvested. Again, I cut about half the leaves off here just to kind of make sure that these things don't dry out too fast. And I'm just taking some of these that didn't really have very much meat left on the bone. Taking them back in there. They've got a huge root mass, so these little roots, well, a lot of them, they'll turn into little fingers that you'll eventually harvest. I have an abundance of these roots, so I think I'm going to plant another bed out of these, or give some to the neighbors. And that's pretty much all you got to do. Just stick those back in the ground. Wait about a year and a half. Best to harvest them in the fall again. So this is super exciting. I'm going to get out of here before my neighbors realize all of this delicious gold that I just harvested and try to come and take it from me. But if you guys know of any other types of ginger that you grow, please post in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and like, and we will be seeing you next time here at NatureHub. Check us out at naturehub.com.